Part 2. When he was again seen in the streets, shaven and clean, he looked like a young man. His chin sparkled with the long-delayed shave, and his mustache was trimmed to perfection. He looked so tidy when he went along the street again with his shirt and upper cloth that people stopped and asked, "Where have you been all this time, Margaya?" He had no answer, so he said, "Here. All along. Where should I go?" "I haven't seen you in your usual place or anywhere." "Usual place? Oh, there. You mean, that was only a side business for me, more for my own diversion. I'm busy with other plans," he said grandly. About the time he closed his business he had 200 rupees in hand, out of which the previous month's household expenses took 60 rupees. The 40-day ritual cost him at least 2 rupees a day for fruit and flowers and special offerings. Then he had to have a feast on the last day and feed 4 Brahmins, and give them each a silver rupee on betel leaves after the meal. About 100 rupees in all were gone. He found himself grudging this expense and explained to himself, "How can I grudge it? Can't a man spend at least so much for earning the benevolence of a goddess?" He had a magic syllable carved on leather and tied to his sacred thread. He wished he could know when the beneficial effect would start, when the skies would open and start raining down wealth. He wished he could get an answer to his question. In his despair he tried to meet the priest. But somehow the priest had not encouraged him to call again. For a day Margaya was seized with the horrible thought that the man had played a practical joke on him. What if he had merely fooled him? Priests were capable of anything. Every word that the priest had uttered seemed to lend support to this suspicion. He had even taken the trouble to avoid him. Days passed, and his misgivings increased. He seemed to have suddenly lost all plans in life. His purse was getting lighter each day. It was difficult to while away the time. From morning to night he had to think what he should do next. If he stayed at home, it invariably resulted in some clash with his wife, for his son misbehaved so much in his presence that either he or his wife felt impelled to chastise him, and Cash vehemently protested when the other did it. And then all kinds of controversies started between him and his wife. It was such a strain having always to talk in whispers lest the POPLE next door should overhear. He sat dejectedly facing Goddess Lakshmi and mentally saying to her, "You have taken my last coin. What have you given me in return? Has the priest been fooling me?" He felt indignant at this thought. If he has fooled me, God help him, I'll have my fingers round his throat. As he lay across the hall on a towel spread on the floor, his mind was busy with these thoughts. In that small house, it was a bother to have the head of the house all the time lying across the floor. Margaya's wife had quite a number of visitors coming in each day. A brinjal seller who brought in her basket, walked across the hall and sat in the backyard veranda to transact her business. The servant woman who came in to wash the vessels and scrub the backyard an hour a day. A fat lady, wife of a lawyer, who dropped in for a chat in the afternoons. And some school children who came running in during the afternoon recess for a drink of water. When Margaya lay across the hall of his house he obstructed their passage to the rear veranda and kitchen where the lady of the house received them. Every time a visitor arrived Margaya had to scramble to his feet and stand aside to let the visitor pass. They went on and asked Margaya's wife privately, "Why is your husband not going out?" The lady felt confused and awkward and gave out some reply, but later questioned him. "What has come over you that you don't go out at all?" "Where should I go? Like all the other men, why don't you try to do some work and earn some money? Money is not..." "Oh, is that so? I didn't know. I thought it was something to be had in the street." Thus their talk went on, entirely lacking in point. She had no clear idea of what she expected him to do, and he had no clear idea of what he should do outside the house. He tried it for a few days. His steps naturally led him to the cooperative bank. But it was clear that he had lost his place. His previous clients only tried to avoid him, fearing that he might accost them for their old dues. He had no one to talk to. He went through the town like a lost soul, but although to begin with some people spoke to him, now nobody took any notice of him. He could not go down the market road for fear of being stopped by the optician. So after a few days of aimless wandering, he took to staying at home. It delighted only his little son and no one else. Next door they remarked, "What has come over that man? He is hardly to be seen outside. Is he hiding from creditors?" They had also wondered previously why so much scent of incense emanated from the next house. They must be up to some mischief, perhaps trying black magic on someone they don't like. We must be careful with such people. As the month came to an end and Margaya had to buy rice and salt for the pantry, he found himself short by 10 rupees, and they had to manage without ghee. His wife declared, "I have never been in this plight before." Balu made matters worse by asking, "Mother, I want ghee." "There is no ghee, my boy. You must eat your food as it is," Margaya replied. "I won't," said Balu, throwing away the rice and getting up. "You'll learn to be contented with what you get," Margaya moralized foolishly. "No, I won't. I want ghee," said the boy rebelliously, kicking away his rice plate. "If you kick away your rice, I will kick you," Margaya said, at which the boy burst into tears and appealed to his mother. She burst into tears too because it reminded her of the story of Gora Kumbar, a potter, who was devoted to the god Vishnu and took no care of his family. At meal times his little son demanded ghee, without which, just like Balu, he would not eat. The lady went out to borrow ghee from the next house, leaving the child in the care of the father. 61. Who was stamping on wet clay all the time? When she was gone, he got into a mystic ecstasy and started dancing, and did not notice the child crawling under his feet. And when the mother returned with ghee, the child had been stamped into the wet mud. Margaya's wife burst into tears, remembering this story, which she had seen as a drama in her young days. Margaya, bewildered and pained by all the scene, ate his food in silence, but, without ghee and with all this misery, it tasted bitter. He decided to search out the priest. "I can't keep quiet anymore. He will have to tell me what is what, otherwise, I will not let him off lightly." Margaya sought him out late that night. He pretended to go to the temple very late in the evening for worship, and hung about till the crowd cleared. He heard the priest's voice inside the sanctum. When the crowd dispersed, he moved up to the threshold of the sanctum and peered in. There was a new man there. Margaya asked, "Where is he?" "Who?" "The other priest." "Why?" Margaya felt annoyed. Why were these priests assuming such impudent and presumptuous manners? But the priest was in the proximity of God, and Margaya was afraid to speak sharply. He controlled his voice and temper and answered, "I have some business with him." "What business?" asked the priest, tossing flowers on the image without turning in his direction. "Does this man think he is God?" wondered Margaya. "He is so indifferent." Probably, he thought, the other priest had told him, "Margaya may be dropping in often, asking for me. If he comes, show him the utmost rudeness and keep him out." It seemed quite possible to his sickly imagination. Margaya opened his lips to say something, but in came some devotees with coconut and camphor, and the priest became busy attending to them. Margaya noted with pain the differential treatment that was being meted out. It's quite clear that he has been told to snub me. See how warm and effusive he is to those people. It is because he hopes to get money out of them. Money is everything, dignity, self-respect. This fellow is behave. Ing towards me like the cooperative bank secretary. In his mind he saw arrayed against him the secretary, Arul Das, this man, and the washerwoman who abused him on the day his son destroyed the account book. It seemed such a formidable and horrible world that he wondered how he had managed to exist at all. The priest now came out bearing a plate with a camphor flame on it, which lit up his face. Margaya noted that he was a very young man. The others put money into the plate after touching the flame. The priest paused near Margaya, who just looked away. I have paid enough for these godly affairs, thought Margaya. The priest threw a sour look at him and went in. The devotees left. The priest sat down before the image and started reciting some holy verse. Margaya stood on the threshold. The other paused during his recitation and asked, "What are you waiting for?" "I'm only waiting for your honor to come out and answer my question." "Am I an astrologer? What's your question?" "This man is practicing studied rudeness on me. He has been taught to." This young fellow, thought Margaya. His anger rose. He became reckless. "Hey, young man, who taught you to speak so rudely?" The young man looked surprised for a moment, and then raised his voice and resumed his recitation. Margaya cried, "Stop it and answer me. A very devout man." "Indeed. You want to stop God's work. Who are you?" "A youngster like you need not ask unnecessary questions. Learn to give correct answers before you think of putting questions. At your age." The youth asked, "What do you want?" "What I want to know is, where is the old priest? And, if you can, answer without asking why." "He has gone on a pilgrimage." "When did he go?" "About a month ago." "When will he come back?" "I don't know." "Where has he gone?" "To Benares. From there he is going on foot all along the course of the Ganges, to its very source in the Himalayas." 63. Why is he doing all this? I don't know. How can I say? Margaya felt indignant. He walked out of the temple without another word. He felt he had been cheated. That old priest had played a trick on him, making him waste all his money and performing fantastic things. Benares, Ganges, Himalayas. How am I to get at him? He wished he could go to the Himalayas and search him out. For a moment he speculated pleasantly on what might happen to the old man there. He might get drowned in the Ganges, or die of sunstroke on the way, or get frozen in the ice of the Himalayas. Next day he wandered up and down, through the east and the west districts of the town, in search of an idea. He got up in the morning, hoping that some miracle would happen, some chance or fortune be picked up on the doorstep. He got up early and opened the door. There were the usual goings-on of Vinayak Mudali Street, and nothing more: a curd seller passing with the pot on her head, a couple of cyclists going to a mill, some children running out to play an early game, and so on. But he saw nothing that was likely to bring him the fruits of his penance. He felt acutely unhappy. He wandered all over the town in search of an idea. He went up to the northern section and sat on the hot sands of the Sarayu thinking. He sat in the shade of a tree and watched the sky and river. His mind had become blank. He went down the market road, looking at every shop. He was searching for an idea. He watched every trade critically. Tailoring? Haircutting saloon? Why not? Any labor had dignity, but all of them would be more troublesome than anything he had known. Nobody will give me money for nothing. I must give them something in exchange. He sat on the parapet of the market fountain and thought. What was it that people most needed? It must be something that every person could afford. The best business under the sun was either snuff or tooth powder or both. It had to be something for which every citizen would be compelled to pay a certain small sum cash day. He was engrossed in profound economic theories. Snuff. His mind gloated over the visions of snuff. The initial outlay would be small, just enough to buy a bundle of tobacco. He knew all about it, for there used to be a snuff maker in front of his house. All his equipment was a few cinders of charcoal, a small iron grate, and a mud pot for frying the tobacco in. Fry and pound the tobacco, add a little lime, and leave the rest to the snuffers themselves. Margai's snuff for flavor, this was worth trying. It was an investment of 10 rupees. He must fry the leaves in a place far away from human habitation. Tobacco, while being fried, sent up a choking smoke which kept the neighborhood coughing and complaining. He wondered how long it would take to realize the profits. A year or less, or not at all. Suppose people never touched his snuff and it accumulated in tins up to the ceiling? What could he do with them? He might probably use the stock himself. But he himself had been addicted to the Golden Monkey brand for years, and he dared not try any other. Or he might manufacture tooth powder. His mother used to make a sort of tooth powder with burnt almond shell and cinnamon bark and alum, and it was said to convert teeth into granite. Margaya now thought of his mother with gratitude. There was always a big crowd of sufferers waiting for her at the hall of their old house. She was of a charitable disposition. She took the stock out of a large earthen jar and distributed it liberally. His father used to declare, "You will be reborn in a heaven of golden teeth for this." She did it as a form of charity, and their house was known as the Tooth Powder House. It seemed an ideal business to start now. The world was going to be transformed into one of shining teeth. But a misgiving assailed him. How could he make people buy it rather than the dozen other tooth powders? He didn't know the art of selling tooth powder. He couldn't go about hawking it in the streets. It would be a fine lookout if the secretary of the cooperative society caught him at it. Arul Das would call out, "Hey, tooth powder, come here, give me a packet. Here are 3 pies." And he would have to gather the coppers like a beggar, with peals of laughter ringing out from the whole world. And the old priest might chuckle from the Himalayas for having reduced him to a picker of copper coins. No, he told himself, I'm a businessman. I can only do something on the lines of banking. It's no good thinking of all this. He watched the fountain hissing and squirting, while the traffic flowed past, and sighed, as he had sighed so often before, at the thought of his banyan tree business. Find himself looking for an orphan's corpse and dashing about with a mud tray in his hand. "Hello, friend," cried Dr. Powell from the other side of the fountain. He was coming down the road on his cycle. "I thought I should never see you again. You went away without telling me where you lived. You didn't come again for Lotus." It took time for Margaya to be shaken from his business reverie. "Oh, you," he cried, not exactly liking being disturbed by this man now. He felt shy of meeting him, associating him with smut. Dr. Powell leaned his cycle on the parapet and came over and sat beside him. You didn't come again for Lotus, he said. Oh, Lotus 1 was enough for me, said Margaya, putting into his tone all the despair he felt at the whole wasted activity. People always go for Lotus in a series, never in singles, said the other obscurely. Margaya laughed, pretending that he read some inner meaning. Well, what makes you spend your time sitting here? Pal asked. Margaya thought, why can't people leave me alone? He didn't like to give the correct explanation. He said, someone has promised to come up and meet me here. Oh, a business meeting, I suppose. Of course, said Margaya. I have no time for just casual meet. Ings, the time is, he looked around him. 4, said the other, looking at his wristwatch. You won't mind if I keep you company? Oh, not at all, replied Margaya mortified, but he overcame his mortification enough to add, I only fear it may hold you up unnecessarily. You may have other business. I'm on duty even when I'm sitting here and talking to you. I'll make a story of it for my paper, that's all they want. They won't mind as long as I fulfill my duty. Surely, you won't write about me, Margaya said. Why not? I might say Mr. Oh, what's your name please? I've not inquired. Excellent name. Initials? No initials. Oh, no initials, that's excellent. Initials indicate town and parentage. But that's for lesser folk who have to announce their antecedents. It's not necessary for me. If you say Margaya, everyone will know. However, that's not my name. Oh, I thought it was. How? The how of things is my trade secret. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a writer. My business is to know things, not tell anyone how, you understand. Extraordinary fellow, Margaya said. Yes, I am, said the other. I know it. Come along, let us go somewhere and gossip. We are doing it here quite well, said Margaya. Oh, no, this place is too noisy. I want to talk to you privately. Come on, don't say no. He was irresistible. Margaya remembered in time to protest. But I have told you I am waiting here for someone. Oh, he will follow us there, don't worry. Come along to my office. I must show you my office. They walked along, through the crowd. It seemed to be all the same for Margaya, what he did or where he went. He followed the other blindly. He took him through the eastern end of Market Road, turned into a lane, stopped before a house and knocked on the door. A little boy opened it. Who is inside? Pal asked. No one, the boy said. That's fine, said Pal, as I expected. Open my office then. Young fellow. The young man disappeared and opened a side door and put his head out. Hold the cycle, commanded Pal. The young man came out with alacrity and took hold of the bicycle. Pal marched in, asking Margaya to follow. He followed him into a very small room stuffed with empty packing cases, piled up to the ceiling. There was a stool in the middle of it with a higher stool before it. On the wall hung a printed sheet, Silverway Chief Representative's Office. There were a few stacks of paper in a corner. Don't look shocked by the state of my office, said Pal. This is only a temporary place. I'm moving into a big office and showroom as soon as it is ready. Where? Margaya asked. Wherever it may be available. That's all I can say. You know how it is with the present housing conditions. Margaya did not feel disposed to agree with him. He said, you can get houses if you honestly try. After all, you want only a room. But nobody will give it to me free, don't you see, and that is the only condition on which our chief office is prepared to accept any accommodation. You see my problem. They want a place in the town to be called their office, but they won't pay any rent for it. I got this because I also write accounts for these businessmen and they have allowed me to hang up my board. What do they deal in? Tooth powder or something like that? Margaya asked. They make cheap soap and export it to Malaya, make a lot of. Mansi, he said, must be an easy job. Margaya reflected aloud. Most messy and a terrible gamble. But I think there is a lot of money in it, said Margaya. His mind at once went off. He had no clear idea how soap was made. He only remembered some piece of odd knowledge about coconut oil and caustic. Perhaps 100 rupees invested might soon multiply, provided the soap became popular. Give it a lot of attractive coloring and sell it cheap and people would flock to buy it. Margaya's soap, Margaya's tooth powder, Margaya's snuff. The choice of his business now seemed to be between these three. He would have to make up his mind about it and start somewhere instead of idling away the day on the fountain parapet. There was silence during these reflections. The other watched him, and then asked, "Have you done with your deep reflections?" Some ideas connected with my business came to my mind suddenly. Sit down there. It's not nice to remain standing, said Pal. Margaya sat down. Pal sat down on the higher stool. Margaya, listen to me very attentively, he began. I am speaking to you on a very important matter now. Go ahead, I am not deaf. ... You can speak in whispers if you like, if it is such a great secret, Margaya said. If you are thinking of making money or more money or just money, speak out, said Pal almost in a whisper, coming close to his face. His eyes were so serious that Margaya said, How did you guess? Men's minds. I'm a psychologist and I know. What are they? Margaya said. Money and sex. You need not look so shocked. It is the truth. Down with your sham and hypocritical self-deception. Tell me truthfully, is there any moment of the day when you don't think of one or the other? Margaya did not know how to answer. It seemed a very embarrassing situation. Pal said, I'm an academician and I'm only interested in truth and how human beings face it. I think of plenty of other things too, Margaya said defensively. What are they? About my son and what he is doing. What is it but sex? Asked the dialectician. You cannot think of your son without thinking of your wife. Oh, that will do, said Margaya indignantly. I don't like any one to talk of my wife. Why not? Persisted Pal. Have you considered why people make such a fuss about their wives? It is all based on primitive sexual jealousy. No, you should not speak lightly about wives. You know nothing about them. If you are a bachelor, then I don't know what you are. I am a sociologist, and I cannot sugarcoat my words. I have to speak scientifically. Margaya was overawed by the man's speech. He did not quite grasp what he was saying. All the same, he said, it is generally understood that you may talk of any subject freely, but you must not make free reference to another man's wife. Nor to one's own wife, added Pal. I don't think anyone can speak openly about his wife. If he could speak out openly what she means to him and what she thinks of him or he of her behind the screen of their house or behind the screen of their bedchamber, you will know. Oh, stop, cried Margaya. I won't hear any more of it. He felt ashamed. This sociologist, or whatever he called himself, seemed to be preoccupied with only one set of ideas. Margaya said, I wish you would marry some strong girl and settle down. It will give you other things to think of. I don't want to think of anything else. I feel I am made by God in order that I may enlighten people in these matters and guide their 69. Steps to happiness, asserted Pal. And do you know it is the most paying, most profitable occupation in the present-day world? At this Margaya sat up. This was a sentiment which appealed to him. He said, "What do you mean by that?" "I'm going to start a sociology clinic, a sort of harmony home, a sort of hospital for creating domestic happiness, a sort of psycholic ICAL clinic, where people's troubles are set right. I can charge a small fee. Do you know how many people will come in and go out of it each day? I am certain to earn 500 rupees a day easily. My book, Bed Life, you remember you saw it?" "Yes. That's only a first step in the scheme. When that book is published, I expect to have at least 1,00,000 of copies sold." "At what price?" asked Margaya. "Say it about ₹1 per copy. You must not price it higher than that. After all, our purpose is to reach the common man." "You mean to say that you are going to make 1,00,000 of rupees out of it?" "Yes. What is strange about that? That's only for a start. 1,00,000 of rupees. 1,00,000 of rupees." In Margaya's size this man began to assume grandeur. This lank fellow, cycling about and gathering news, held within his palm the value of 1,00,000 of rupees. Margaya was filled with admiration. Tooth powder and snuff and all the rest seemed silly stuff beside this. You could never see 1,00,000 of rupees with these commodities. It would probably go back into the oven again and again, perhaps. But here was a man who spoke of 1,00,000 of rupees as if it were a 5-rupee note. "That's only a starting point," Pal added. "There is no reason why it should not go on earning a similar sum year after year. It's a property which ought to bring in a regular rent. There is no limit to your sales. The book will simply be there will be such a clamor from humanity for this stuff that ultimately every human being will own a copy. The Tamil-speaking area in India gives us a good start. Add to it the tens and thousands of people in Siam, Burma, South Africa and so on, and you get the number of copies you should print. And then if it is translated into Hindi, it should reach the whole of India, and the population of India is 360 million according to the last census. If every man parts with a rupee, see where you are." "Yes," replied Margaya, greatly impressed. "I never thought there was such a wide scope for selling books." "Not for all books. For instance, if I wrote a book of, say, poems or philosophy, nobody would touch it, but a book like Bed Life is a thing that everyone would like to read. Do you know, people like to be told facts, people like to be guided in such matters. Ultimately, as I told you, I shall open a clinic. I want to serve mankind with my knowledge. I don't want to keep it within my closed fists. We must all be helpful to each other. I have worked for years and years studying and writing, just in order that mankind may be helped." He spoke without stopping for breath, and concluded, "Do you know, if I just throw down a hint anywhere that there is such a book as this, people will fall over each other to publish it." "Indeed." "Yes, there are offers of 10,000 rupees or more for it. But I won't part with it for 10 times that amount." "Why not?" asked Margaya. "Because I can do better than that if I keep it. If people come to make a business offer, they will find me very hard, let me assure you, because I know my mind." "So it will be impossible to get it out of you?" asked Margaya. "Yes, generally, if anyone comes to me as a businessman." "Oh," Margaya said, remembering with despair that he came under that category. The other added, "But let a man come to me as a friend and hold out his hand, the book is his." "But you will lose your lack." "I wouldn't care. Don't imagine I am so fond of money. I treat money as dirt." This was a shocking statement for Margaya. He cried, "Oh, don't say such things. You must not." He recollected how the goddess Lakshmi was such a sensitive creature that if a man removed a tumbler of milk she fled from the place and withdrew her grace. "I'm a man who cares for work, human relationships, and service to mankind," said Dr. Pal. "Money comes last in my list." Margaya felt a desperate idea welling up in him. He could hold it back no longer. It almost burst through his lips, and he asked, "Suppose I say, give me that for printing and selling, what would you do?" 71. In answer, the other went out and came back carrying the bag which had been hanging from his cycle handle. He thrust his hand into the bag and brought out the manuscript. Without another look at it, he dropped it on Margaya's lap as he sat on the stool. "Are you playing?" asked Margaya, hardly able to believe his eyes. It was bound in a blue wrapper. He vaguely turned its leaves to assure himself that it was the right book. Principles of M. Bracing. "You take it, it's yours. Do whatever you like with it," said Pal magnificently. "No, no, no," said Margaya. "How can I?" "It's no longer mine," said the other. "It is a bargain which is closed." He looked resolute. He then held out his hand and said, "Give me what you have in your pocket. I will take it in exchange. It's a bargain. You cannot back out of it." Margaya said, "I haven't brought any money." "Then why have you brought that purse? I see its outline." Margaya looked down with a sigh. Yes, the damned stuff was showing. "It's not a purse," he tried to say. But the other said, "Take it out. Let me see what it is that looks like a purse, but isn't." "Stick to your bargain." Margaya put his hand in and brought out the little purse, which had a silver George V embossed on it. He opened it. 25 rupees were all its contents. He took out a 5-rupee note and placed it on the outstretched palm of Dr. Pal. The other didn't close his fingers or withdraw his arm. He sternly said, "Stick to your bargain. Empty it." "This is all I have," pleaded Margaya. "I'm giving you all that I have for my part." Margaya said, "I have to buy rice. I have a wife and child. Don't be theatrical. Stick to your bargain. Here is something I'm giving you worth at least 1,00,000 of rupees. In return for it, give me your purse. I will take it whether it contains 1 rupee or 1,000 or none. Isn't it a fair bargain?" "I can't give you my purse. It's a lucky purse. I've had it for countless years now." "I don't want your purse. Give me only its contents." "I don't want your book. I don't know how to print or sell a book." "Go to a printer and he will print it. You tell the public the book is ready and they will come and buy it. There are no further com. 72. Plications. It's the easiest business under the sun. In fact, you will hardly be able to meet the demand. "Then why have you not done it yourself?" asked Margaya. "Well, I was about to. But just to show you what is a bargain, I've made my offer," he drawled. "If you are really keen on canceling this bargain, I am ready for it. On second thoughts, I don't see why I should waste my breath on you." He reached for the manuscript on Margaya's lap, saying, "Every man must make his choice in life. This is a crossroads at which you are standing. Some day you will see another man going away in his roles, while you sit on the market fountain and brood over my words of this evening. I will give you 5 minutes to think it over. I'll have the entire contents of your purse or none at all." He kept his arm outstretched to receive the manuscript back and fixedly gazed at his wristwatch. His face was grim. Margaya's face perspired with intense excitement. "I'm losing 20,000 each minute," he told himself. 20, 40, 60. He wanted to say, "Give me 5 minutes more," but his throat had gone dry. No words came. By the time he could get his voice to produce a sound again, another 10 seconds were gone. Looking at this man, he prayed, God, why have you put me in the company of this terrible man amidst these wooden boxes? A yellowish sunlight came in through a top ventilator and fell on the opposite wall. He will probably choke me if I don't agree, he ruminated. He wondered if he should scream for help. Somewhere a cycle bell sounded. Wasn't it auspicious, the sounding of a bell? 3 seconds more, said the other. The sound of the bell was the voice of God. God spoke through his own signs. Margaya's decision was made. He suddenly felt lighter and said jocularly, 3 seconds. That's a great deal yet. He added grandly, tell me when there is still half a second to go, and pushed away the other's outstretched arm. Margaya carried the manuscript home as if he was trying to secrete a small dead body. He was afraid lest somebody should stop him on the way and look at it. He had begged Pal at least to wrap it in paper. Pal snatched up an old issue of Silver Way and wrapped it up. Margaya told himself all along the road, I must see that the young fellow doesn't get at it. His plan had been to tuck it within. 73. The folds of a stack of clothes in his box the moment he reached home. At the front door he saw his wife with his son on her lap, inducing him to swallow his food by diverting his attention to the stars in the sky and the street below. Father! The little fellow cried joyfully, trying to jump out of his mother's arms. Wait, wait, Margaya said, and passed in swiftly, trying to conceal the bundle under his arm. What is it that you are carrying? His wife asked as he went by. Bread? He made no reply but walked straight in, opened his box and securely locked it up. He then went through his routine of changing and washing. His wife brought in the child and gave him into his care. Baloo said, a monkey came to our house. That's very good, Margaya said. What did it do? It ate coconut and will come again tomorrow. Father, why don't you buy me a monkey? Yes, when you are a good boy. Baloo is a good boy, he replied, certifying to his own conduct. Margaya sat in the corridor with his son on his lap. He felt light and buoyant, expansive, and full of hope that the good things of life were now within his reach. He hummed a tune to himself, and played with his son. All the time his wife was very curious to know what he had brought in the parcel. She knew by trying to look severe she would never get the truth out of him. She said something agreeable about the boy. Do you know what a change is coming over the little fellow? He is so quiet and obedient nowadays, she said, coming and standing beside him. Margaya replied, he is the finest youngster except when he is otherwise, and laughed. The boy looked at him bewildered and said, why do you laugh? I don't know, Margaya said, and all of them laughed heartily. The boy, having heard a good report about himself, wanted to keep it up, and did nothing to exasperate his father. He ate a quiet dinner, lay down on his mat and ordered his father to tell him a story. Margaya strained his memory and began the story of the fox, the crow and the lion, till the boy interrupted him with, I don't like the fox story. Tell me a flower story. I don't know any flower story, Margaya pleaded. At this the boy threatened to kick his legs and cry. Margaya hastily began. 74. Once upon a time there was a good flower, and fumbled and hummed and hawed, wondering how people wrote hundreds of pages of stories, which brought to his mind Dr. Pal and his book how those people ever could sit down and write so many pages. He admired for a moment their patience, and subsequently corrected himself. He didn't like to admire anyone and so said to himself, these fellows have no better business. That's why they sit down and fill up sheets, whereas we businessmen have hardly any time left even to compose our letters. The boy insisted on knowing at this stage. What flower was it? Lotus, he felt like saying, but checked himself and said, some flower. Why do you want its name now? And then blundered through a clumsy, impossible story, till the boy fell asleep out of sheer lack of interest. After finishing all her work, his wife came up with an endearing smile and sat beside him on the mat. He put his arm round her and drew her nearer, recollecting the chapter on Principles of Embracing. She nestled close to him. It was as if they had thrown off 20 years and were back in the bridal chamber. He said, why don't you buy flowers regularly? I see that you don't care for them nowadays. I am an old woman, flowers and such things. But this old man likes to see some flowers in this old lady's hair, he said. They laughed and felt very happy. And then she asked at the correct moment, what is that bundle you brought with you? Oh, that, you wish to see it? Yes, yes, of course, she said, quite thrilled at the prospect. He got up, opened his trunk and brought out the packet wrapped in silver way. He slowly opened the wrapping and took out the manuscript. At the sight of it her face shadowed with disappointment. What's this? She asked. It's a book. Oh, I thought you had brought me some surprise gift, I thought. There was a note of disappointment in her voice. Book, paper, she said contemptuously. What book is this? You see for yourself, he said, and gave her the packet. She turned the leaves and was horrified. What is it all about? It seems to be, but she could not say anything more. It seems to be so vulgar. No, no, don't say such a thing, he said. He didn't like to hear. 75. Any disparaging reference to the book. It's a scientific book. It's going to bring in a lot of money. She made a wry face and said, how can anybody have written about all this? You men have no. What's wrong with it? It's something going on all over the world every moment. It's very important. People should possess correct scientific knowledge, and then all marriages will be happy. I'm going to educate Baloo in all these matters the moment he is interested. Oh, stop that, she cried and flung away the book. He picked it up, bent close to the lamp and started reading it aloud. It was probably too scientific for ordinary mortals. She listened both horrified and fascinated. A few days later, Margaya walked into the Gordon Printery in Market Road. It was a fairly big establishment in Malgudi. Every form, letterhead, and bill book in Malgudi was printed at Gordon's. Its proprietor was a man from Bombay who came and settled down here years ago, a hefty, rose-cheeked man called Maiden-Lal. He sat at a table, right in the middle of a hall where a dozen people were creating the maximum amount of noise with various machines, which seemed to groan and hiss and splutter. In this general uproar he sat calmly poring over proofs, and opposite his table were ranged 2 iron chairs. Margaya stood at the entrance. He felt lonely and isolated and unhappy. They might sneer at him and tear up his manuscript. If the secretary and Arul Das came down at this moment to see some of their own printing. He overcame this sinking feeling immediately. Self-assurance is the most important quality to cultivate, he realized. He sounded quite assertive when he asked someone at the entrance, "Where is your proprietor?" "Sitting there," the man replied. "Oh, I didn't notice," Margaya said, and went up. The man looked up from his papers and asked, "What can I do for you?" He pointed at an iron chair. Margaya sat down, placed his manuscript before him and said with a lot of self-assurance, "I wish to have this book printed. Can you take it on?" "That I can say only after going through the manuscript." "Go on, read it." said. I have no time now. You can leave it here. Impossible, said Margaya. I am not prepared to leave it with anyone. You can go through it here while I wait. I've other business. I've also other business. I have come to you for printing, not for any other business. If you are not prepared to take it on, say so, and he put out his arms towards the manuscript. Oh, no, don't lose your patience, the other pleaded. He picked up the manuscript and glanced at the title page. Ah, he exclaimed. And then he passed on. Every chapter heading in every page seemed to fascinate him. He kept exclaiming, ah, ah, and Margaya sat before him and watched with complete aloofness. He admired himself for it. This is the right attitude to cultivate in business. If we show the slightest hesitation or uneasiness, others are only too ready to swallow us up. Proof bearers came up and waited around until Lal should look up. An accountant stood there with an open ledger in his hand, waiting to catch his attention. Lal kept exclaiming, ah, ah, every few seconds. His staff stood around in a circle. Get out of the way, everyone, and give me light, he suddenly shouted. The accountant alone came up and said, undaunted, this is urgent. He placed the fat book on the manuscript. Lal snatched a minute to look into it, and pushed it away. When his accountant showed signs of looking over his shoulder, he said brusquely, don't try to see what people are reading. Go away, and the accountant went away. Lal looked for a moment at Margaya and said, the curiosity some people have. They have a lot of unhealthy curiosity about all sorts of things. Margaya said, are you going to read through the entire manuscript? Yes, said the other. Otherwise, how can I know whether I can print it or not? Have I to sit here all the time? Asked Margaya. Why not? That's what you said you would do. Otherwise you may go out and return. What was the man proposing? Margaya reflected. Perhaps he had some dark design. No, even if it took a whole day, he would sit up there. Never go out of sight of those papers. I will wait here, said Margaya. Go through it fast. Yes, yes, the other cut in impatiently. Don't disturb me. Papers continued to come to him. Lal was indifferent. Proofs piled up on his table. Attenders waited around for approval of copy. The accountant came up again and again for his signature on a leather-bound book. Lal snapped at him and signed. And then he pushed the other papers unceremoniously off his table, saying, no one is to come near me till I am through with this piece of work. This is very urgent and important. Don't you see this gentleman waiting? The machine room foreman came up presently. He hovered about, cleared his throat, and ventured to say, the school report, sir. The machine is idle. Oh, he replied, then rummaged amongst his papers, snatched a proof, and after the briefest glance at it, flung it at him. Go ahead. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon when Lal looked up and said, I'm hungry, and yet I have not finished. Still 30 pages more. I have to go home. You wouldn't leave this with me, I suppose. No, said Margaya resolutely. How can I? Then you come along with me for lunch. Margaya felt worried. This man from the North God knew what he ate at home. Perhaps beef and pork and strange spices. How could he go and sit with him? He said bluntly, I have already had my food. That's excellent. Come along with me. No, I have to go home. Why should you if you have had your dinner already? I have got some other business. Then what do you want me to do? Sit here with this, foregoing my meal, is that it? As you please. You must have read enough of it to know what to tell me. Be reasonable, mister, he appealed. If you give me a little more time, I will finish it and then I shall be in a position to discuss the matter with you. Then go on, Margaya said. I am not preventing your reading further. The other hammered on the call bell impatiently till an attendant came up and stood before him. Go home and tell them I'm not coming for my meal today. Send somebody and get something from the restaurant for two. Coffee and several plates arrived. Lal pushed away all the papers to make space for the plates and invited Margaya to eat. He kept the manuscript on his lap, his eyes running down the lines. His fingers strayed towards the plates on the table and carried the food to his mouth as if they had an independent life of their own. He looked up for a brief moment at Margaya and said, go on, make yourself comfortable. Margaya had some plates on his side of the table. He hesitated only for a moment, and then said to himself, why not? He was hungry. He had had a sparse meal hours ago. They had put before him many tempting colored sweets and coffee. This is indeed lucky, he reflected. This is good tiffin. It'd have cost me over a rupee. He ate the jalebis, and wondered if it would be proper to carry a bit of it home for little Balu. He was racked with a feeling that he was stealing some delicacy which ought to have gone to his child. Make yourself comfortable, Lal said hospitably from time to time without lifting his eyes from the manuscript. Margaya noticed that the other was a voracious eater, and polished off all sorts of oddments in a lump, it didn't matter what. That's why he is so hefty, Margaya reflected. He is not a half-fed, half-starving businessman like me. That's why he is able to command so much business and income. When the plates were removed, Lal wiped his mouth with a handkerchief, looked at Margaya and announced, I have finished reading the book. Well, what do you think you can do? It's an interesting book, no doubt. It's a book that must be read by everybody, Margaya added. No, don't say that. It's not fit for everybody's reading. For instance, if a young unmarried person reads it, he will know a lot of facts beforehand, Margaya said, and this established a greater communion between the two. Lal said, Mister, I must consult my lawyer first. What has a lawyer to do with it? Margaya asked. The mention of a lawyer was distasteful to him. The trouble is, said the other, I must know if it comes under the obscenity law. There is such a law, you know. They may put us both in prison. It's not obscene. It's a work of sociology. Oh, is it? Then there is no trouble. But I'd like to be told that by a lawyer. Will you please come again tomorrow at this time? 79. What for? I will have discussed the matter with my lawyer, and then I shall be able to tell you something. If only you could leave the book with me. That I can't do, said Margaya, sensing another effort on the part of the printer to get at the manuscript. He added for emphasis, that I can't do, whatever may happen. Won't you come with me to the lawyer? When? Asked Margaya, with a profound air of having to consider this engagement diary. Sometime tomorrow. Margaya sat considering. It was no use going to a lawyer. The thought of a lawyer was distasteful to him. The Cooperative Society secretary was a lawyer. All lawyers were troublemakers. Moreover, why should he cheapen himself before this man? He said, Impose Cybele. I have a busy day tomorrow. I can probably drop in just for a few minutes if you like, that is if you are going to tell me definitely yes or no. He added, I came to you because yours is the biggest establishment. I knew you could do it, although a dozen other printers were ready to take on the job. Ours is the best and biggest press, Lal said haughtily. You will not be able to get this service anywhere else, so much I can assure you. What will be your charge? I can tell you all that only after we decide to take on the work. Will you require a long time to print the book? Margaya persisted. I will tell you tomorrow, Lal said. Margaya said, you are a very cautious man. You don't like to commit yourself to anything. That's right, the other said appreciatively, sensing a kindred soul. For among businessmen as among statesmen, the greatest dread was to be committed to anything. Being non-committal was the most widely recognized virtue among businessmen, and it came to Margaya instinctively as his other qualities came to him. The musician hums the right note at birth. The writer goes to the precise phrase in the face of an experience. Whereas for the businessman the greatest gift is to be able to speak so many words which seem to signify something, but don't, which convey a general attitude but are free from commitment. 80. Next day Margaya tidied himself up more than ever and was at the press at the appointed time. He still carried his manuscript securely wrapped in a paper sheet. The moment he entered the press he had a feeling that all was going to go well. He went straight up to Lal and asked, "Well, what does your lawyer say?" "We can take it if you agree to a couple of small conditions." "You can speak your mind freely," Margaya said, encouragingly. "In business we either conclude a deal or we don't, but there is no room for mincing words. If you don't want it here, I can take it somewhere else," he added. "No, no, don't say such a thing, mister," the other said. "I don't like negative statements to be made in this press." "I don't like negative statements myself unless I am forced to make them," said Margaya, discovering instinctively yet another principle of business life, to have the last word. He concluded that he who spoke last gained most. He was burning with anxiety to know if the other would print the book, for he seemed to be a man who knew his job. Margaya looked about and asked in a business-like manner, "What are the two conditions you mentioned just now?" "I will take up the printing provided it's done on a basis of partnership." "What's the partnership for?" "Well, that will make our work more interesting. Let us publish it together, and share whatever we get. I mean 50-50 in everything, expenses as well as returns. Do you agree?" Margaya took a little time before answering. "I won't say yes or no," before thinking over it deeply. "What's your second condition?" "You must indemnify me against any legal action that anyone may take at any time." "What do you mean?" "You must bear the legal responsibility for bringing out this book." "I see," said Margaya with deep suspicion. "Why? It's because you are bringing it out." "If I am bringing it out, you have nothing to do with it except to print it, isn't that so? Then why do you ask for profits? How are you concerned with profits?" For a moment the other looked a little confused, but soon recovered. 81. Enough composure to say, "I mean to propose a non-liability partnership." Margaya was taken in by the high-sounding phrase. What did it mean? It meant evidently sharing his profits, not his troubles. He said, "I've done a variety of business. I'm experienced in different kinds of partnership." "What business were you doing before?" asked Lal. "Chiefly banking," Margaya said. "You know, when a man is a banker he is at once involved in a number of other things too, picturing himself writing a letter here for a villager and arranging a joint loan for another there." Lal seemed to appreciate this. He said, "We have a bank in Gujarat, but you know it also deals in oil seeds in certain seasons." "It's inevitable," Margaya said, with an air of profundity. "It's impossible not to be interested in more than one business," added Lal. They went on talking far into the day. Once again lunchtime came. Once again they got their tiffin from a hotel and Margaya stuffed himself with sweets and coffee and began to feel quite at home in the press. They kept talking non-committally, warmly, discreetly and with many digressions, till late in the evening, but without concluding anything. Their talk and counter-talk never ceased, and the manuscript lay between. At about 6 they dramatically stretched their arms over it, shook hands and concluded the pact, whereby Margaya had the satisfaction of seeing himself a 50-50 partner without any investment on his part. He covered the satisfaction he had in the deal with, "I'm not keen on this, but you seem to have become such a friend to me that I find it difficult to refuse." He pulled a long face and signed a partnership deed with the utmost resignation. He kept saying, "You have won me over. You are a sharp businessman," a compliment which Lal accepted with the utmost cheerfulness. "We can never be businessmen unless we give and take on a 50-50 basis," Lal kept saying, a proposition heartily endorsed by Margaya, although its arithmetic was somewhat complex and beyond the understanding of ordinary men. Margaya knocked on his door with great authority. Lal had offered to drive him home in his car, but Margaya declined it. 82. Definitely, he didn't want him to see his house or street. He explained that after all the hours of sitting in a stuffy atmosphere he would prefer a walk, so as to be fit for work next day. He knocked on his door with such authority that his wife came up hurriedly and opened it. She stood aside to let him pass in. She could not pluck up enough courage to put to him the usual irritating questions. She served him his food and then said in a forced light manner, "This has almost become your usual hour?" "Yes, it may have to be even later hereafter. I shall have to be very busy." "Oh," she said, "is that book printed?" "It's not so easy," he replied. "There are many complications." And as she did not annoy him with further questions, he added, "I have almost signed a partnership agreement with a big man." He liked the sentence and the feeling of importance that it gave him. But he didn't like the word big that he had used. Reflecting, he felt he might take the word out and knock it flat lest his wife should think he really meant anyone was bigger than he. He rectified his mistake by adding, "Big businessman. Big, a North Indian. He thinks he is very clever, but I was able to tweak his nose." "Oh," said his wife, gratified. He seemed to acquire a new stature and importance. He finished his dinner and when he got up she was ready with a bowl of water for his hands. And then she held a towel up to him. He was pleased with all these ministrations, thinking, "Yes, she is not a bad sort, except when she gets into a bad mood." He said aloud, "We can live differently hereafter, I think. A lot of money is coming in." The next day he had a very busy time discussing several technical matters, of which he was totally ignorant, with Lal. Lal seemed to assume that Margaya knew what he was talking about. Margaya, true to his principles, did not wish to show his ignorance. Lal asked, "Shall we print in demi or octavo?" What was demi and what octavo? What strange terms were these? To what universe did they belong? Margaya frankly blinked, wondering. What was this man talking about? He said grandly, "Each has its own advantage, it's for you to decide, you are a technical man." Lal said, "You see, demi will give us greater area." Margaya was hearing the word for the first time in his life. He could not understand to which part of a book or press or sales the word referred. He kept himself alert, deciding not to lose any hint that might fall in the course of the other's talk. He added, "If it means extra area, what other consideration can you have?" "It's not only that, octavo is more handy, and will look less like a gazetteer." At the mention of gazetteer Margaya made a wry face. "Oh, no, we cannot afford to make it look like a gazetteer." In that case we will print it on octavo. All right, he said, permitting it graciously. But as a matter of formality I shall be glad to know the difference in cost. Not much, about an anna per pound, Lal said. Pound? Where did pound come in? He was about to blurt out the question, a survival of his boyhood days in the classroom where, whenever the word pound was mentioned, the immediate question was, LB pound or shilling pence pound. He almost opened his mouth to ask it, but pressed it back in time, remembering that it was a silly betraying question even in those days. The teacher caned all the boys who asked him that question, for it showed that they had not paid any attention to the sum they were doing. Margaya feared if he raised it the other might tear up their agreement or decide to swindle him with absolute impunity. What did they weigh in the book trade? He could understand nothing of it. He dropped it, hoping on some future occasion that he would know all about it. He had an unfailing hope that whatever there was to be known would be known by him one day. Only I must keep my eyes open, and in 6 months I shall be able to tell them what is wrong with them, he thought, with much self-esteem. Lal observed him for a moment and then said, "Why are you silent? You are not saying anything." "It is because I have nothing to say," said Margaya. "So you accept my choice?" "Yes, of course," Margaya said, hoping this would once and for all save him from further embarrassment. But Lal turned up with a new poser for him. "Shall we use ordinary 10-point Roman or another series which I use only for special works? It's also 10-point but on an 11-point body." Body? Points? 10 and 11? What was it all about? Margaya said. "Ah, that is interesting. I should like to see your 11-point body." He had grotesque visions of a torso being brought in by 4 men on a stretcher. When Lal reached out his arm and pulled out a book, he didn't think it had any relation to the question he had asked. He thought Lal was trying to read something. But Lal opened a page, thrust it before him and said, "This is it. How do you like this type?" Margaya gazed at it for fully 5 minutes and said, "It seems all right to me." "What do you say?" "It's one of our finest types," said Lal. "Do you wish to see our ordinary Roman?" Now he roughly knew what this meant. "If this is your best, there's not much reason why anything else should be seen," he said with the air of a man who could employ those few minutes to better profit. He added, in order not to allow the other too easy a time, "Only tell me if you have any special reasons from the point of view of costs." "A difference of a couple of rupees per form, that's all." "That's all, is it?" Margaya said. "How many forms will there be?" Lal glanced through the script and said, "Even if it's going to be page for page, it won't be more than 10 forms. I don't think we ought to worry about a bare difference of 20 rupees, Margaya said, feeling happy that he could after all take part in the discussion. "I agree with," said Lal. "Now about the style of binding, you, etc." "Oh, these details," Margaya exclaimed. "They should not come as far as me. You ought to decide those things yourself. But every item has to go into costs. I don't want you to feel at any time that I have incurred any expense without your knowledge." "That comes only at the end, doesn't it?" Margaya said. "Of course, in the first quarter following publication." And Margaya felt relieved. He had a gnawing fear lest he should have to shell out cash immediately. "And," said Lal, "my lawyer suggests that we had better call this book Domestic Harmony instead of Bed Life. Have you any objection?" "Oh, none whatever," said Margaya. "In these matters we must implicitly obey the lawyers. Otherwise we shall get into trouble." "Yes, otherwise we shall get into trouble," echoed Margaya, adding, We must do everything possible to avoid getting into trouble because a businessman's time is so precious. You are an uncanny fellow. You seem to understand everything, Lal said admiringly. When Baloo was 6 years old, Margaya had him admitted to the town elementary school. Margaya made a great performance of it. He took the young man in a decorated motor with pipes and drums through the market road. The traffic was held up for half an hour when Baloo's procession passed. Baloo sat with the top of his head shaved, with diamonds sparkling on his earlobes, and a rose garland round his neck, in a taxi with 4 of his picked friends by his side. Margaya walked in front of the car, and he had invited a few citizens of the road to go up with him as well. Strangest sight of all, his brother was also with him in the procession. They seemed to have made it up all of a sudden. On the eve of the schooling ceremony, Margaya stated, "After all, he is his own uncle, his own blood, my brother. Unless he blesses the child, of what worth are all the other blessings he may get?" He grew sentimental at the thought of his elder brother. "Don't you know that he brought me up? But for his loving care." He rambled on thus. His wife caught the same mood and echoed, "No one prevents them from being friendly with us. There are times when we should set aside all our usual prejudices and notions. We must not let down ties of blood," Margaya said pompously. As a result of this sentiment, at 5 a.m. they both knocked on the door of the next house and quietly walked past the astounded stare of his brother as he held the door open. Margaya's wife went straight into the kitchen to invite the sister-in-law, and Margaya stood before his brother in the hall and said, "All of you are keeping well as usual, I suppose," adding, "Baloo's schooling ceremony is tomorrow morning. Come and bless him." Oh, yes, his brother said, still somewhat dazed. "Bring yourself and all the children for a meal," Margaya said, and added, "You must not light the oven in your own house. Come in for morning coffee. Where is my sister-in-law?" His brother said, "There." 86. Margaya shouted, "Sister-in-law," familiarly, as he used to do in his boyhood days. It seemed to take him back decades when he was a student coming home during the afternoon recess for rice and buttermilk. He made a move towards the kitchen, when his wife came in the opposite direction, with bowed head, showing the respect due to the elder brother-in-law. She moved off fast, giving Margaya a swift glance, which he understood. He turned and followed his wife quietly into the street. Hardly had they gone up their veranda steps when she whispered, "She will not come." "Why not?" Margaya asked. She bit her lips and nodded, the vicious creature. "She wouldn't speak a word to me." "Why not? Why not? Why not? Don't keep saying that. She is that sort. That is all. She used to be very kind to me in those days." Margaya's sentimentality still lingered in him, as he remembered his school days. "No one prevents you from going and asking her again." "You invited her properly, I suppose," Margaya said. She flared up, "I have abased myself sufficiently." That's all right, Margaya said, scenting danger. His brother and 7 of his children came and presided over the function. He presented young Baloo with a silver box, and at the sight of it Margaya felt very proud and moved. He asked his son to prostrate himself before his uncle ceremoniously and receive his blessings, after which the boy started out for his school in a procession. Om. Margaya's son had a special standing in the school, for Margaya was the school secretary. Teachers trembled before him, and the headmaster stood aside while he passed. They knew Margaya was a powerful man and also that he could be a pleasant and kindly man, who listened to their troubles when they met him at home to discuss small promotions or redress. He listened to them most attentively and promised to do his best, but hardly remembered anything of it next moment. This was purely a defensive mechanism. He simply could not keep in his head all the requests that people brought to him each day. The utmost he could do for them was to be pleasant to them. When they pestered him too much, he merely said, "See here." 87. I took up this work as a sort of service for our people, but this is not my only occupation. As a matter of fact, I did not want all this boosiness, but it was thrust upon me and they wouldn't take my refusal. He spoke like the president of a political party after an election campaign, but his place on the school board did not come to him unsought, nor was it thrust upon him. On the day he admitted Baloo to the school, he realized that his son would not have a chance of survival unless he admitted himself also to the school. Within 15 days of the schooling ceremony, he heard reports that Baloo was being caned almost every day, was having his ears twisted by all and sundry, and that even the school peon pushed him about rudely. He loved his son, and it seemed to him that the school was thoroughly in the wrong. He went there once or twice to rectify matters and was told by the headmaster that it was all false and perhaps the boy deserved all that and more. They treated him in an off-hand manner which angered him very much. They almost hinted that he might take his son away. At the end of the term, Baloo came home with his progress card marked 0. Margaya decided to take charge of the school. He was a busy businessman who could not afford the time for unprofitable honorary work, but he felt he ought to sacrifice himself for the sake of his son's educational progress. He wanted Baloo to grow up into an educated man, graduating out of a college and probably going for higher studies to Europe or America. He had immense confidence in himself now. He could undertake any plan with ease. He could shape his son's future as if it were just so much clay in his hand. His son might become a great government official or something of the kind, or indeed anything in 10 years, if this cursed school were not in his way. He watched for the next election time. It was a strategy of extraordinary complexity and meant expense too, but he did not grudge it. He felt that no expense was too great for a child's future, and slipped into the place of a member whom he had persuaded to retire. After that, one could notice a great improvement in Baloo's career. He never lost his place in the class, and the teachers seemed to have adjusted themselves to his way of thinking. In Adityan, Margaya picked up a home tutor for him. He made this selection with great astuteness. He kept an eye on all the teachers, and sounded his son himself as to whom he would like to have as teacher at home, to which Baloo promptly replied, "No one." 88. Margaya said, "You are not to say that. You must have a home teacher. Tell me whom you like most in your school." After a great deal of persuasion, the boy said, "Nathaniel." Margaya knew him to be a mild Christian gentleman whom all the children loved because he told them numerous stories, let them do what they pleased, never frowned at them even once, and taught them history and such innocuous subjects rather than mathematics. Margaya decided at once to eliminate this gentleman from his list as a home tutor. It is no good appointing a sheep to guard a tiger cub, he told himself. He suddenly asked, "Who is the teacher that beats the boys most?" "The science attender," replied the young innocent. "I don't mean him," Margaya said, "I mean among the teachers." "But the science attender says he is also a teacher. Do you know?" "Father, he beats any boy who doesn't call him sir." "He does that, does he?" exclaimed Margaya angrily. "You go and tell him that he is merely a miserable science peon and nothing more, and if he tries to show off I will cut off his tail." "Has he a tail, father?" asked Baloo. "Oh, I didn't notice." He burst into a laugh, and laughed so loudly and rolled about so much that his father was forced to say, "Stop that. Don't make all that noise." The vision of the science attender with a tail behind only made Baloo roll about more and more. He made so much noise that his mother came out of the kitchen to ask, "What is the matter?" "Mother," the boy screamed, "Father thinks that our science teacher has a tail. The science teacher has a tail." He danced about in sheer joy at this vision, and Margaya could not get anything more out of him. The boy was too wild. He left him alone for the moment but questioned him again later and found that the teacher he most detested was Mr. Moorty, the arithmetic and English teacher, an old man who always carried a cane in his hand, shaved his head and covered it with a white turban, and wore a long coat. To Margaya it seemed to be a very satisfactory picture of a teacher. None of your smart young men with bare heads and crop, with their entertaining stories and so forth. He immediately asked Moorty to see him at his house and fixed him up at once as Baloo's teacher at home and a sort of supervisor for him at school too. His own professional work was taking up more and more of his time cash day. He wanted another agency to protect the interests of his son at school. 89. Moorty was only too happy to accept this job since he earned only 25 rupees at school and the 10 rupees that Margaya arbitrarily offered him was most welcome, as was the perpetual contact he would have with the secretary of the school board day in and day out. It enhanced his status at school among his colleagues and also with the headmaster, who, if he wanted to sound the secretary's state of mind over any important question at school, called aside Moorty and spoke to him in whispers. All this Moorty welcomed, but he also lost something in the bargain, and that was his power over his pupil, Baloo. He knew that although Margaya had asked him to handle him as he would any other boy, the plan would not work. He had far too much experience with people who had an only child and a lot of money. They never meant what they said with regard to their children. No one lost his head so completely over a question of discipline as the parent of an only child. Moorty did not want to offend the young boy and lose his favor so that one day he might tell his father, "I won't be taught by that teacher." On the other hand, he did not want the father to feel that he was not able to handle Baloo. So he walked warily. He tried to earn the goodwill and cooperation of the pupil himself so that his job might be easy. He gave him many gifts of sweets and pencils and rubbers if he did a sum well and forbore his mischief, and treated him generally as a friend. The scheme worked, although the boy was on the verge of blackmailing his teacher whenever he set him more sums than he cared to do. But on the whole the relationship was successful and Baloo progressed steadily from class to class and reached the 4th form. The teacher and the pupil were like old partners now, seasoned partners who knew each other's strong points and weak points. Margaya stuck to his school board election after election. He boasted to his friends and relations whenever he found a chance, "Baloo is just 13, you know, and in 2 years." He gloated over a vision of his son passing into a college. He would give him a separate study in the new house he was planning to build in New Extension. He would buy table lamps with green shades. They said that a green shade was good for the eyes. He would send him to Albert Mission College, although it was at the other end of the town, far away from New Extension. He would buy him a car. People would look at him and say, "Well, there goes Margaya's son. Lucky fellows, these sons of businessmen." 90. Margaya had converted the small room into a study for Baloo. Every morning Margaya carried out an inspection of this room in order to see that his son learnt civilized ways and kept his things in their proper places. But he always found the mat not spread out on the floor, but stood up against the corner half rolled, his books scattered on the floor, and his little desk full of stones, feathers, cigarette foils and empty packets. These were all collected from a small shop made of dealwood planks nearby which had recently been set up by a man from Malabar. Margaya felt unhappy when he saw the condition of this room. In his view, a study had to be a very orderly place, with books arrayed on one side, and the clothes of the scholar folded in their place on the wires stretched across the wall. Margaya had secured a small framed picture of the goddess Saraswati, the goddess of learning and enlightenment, sitting beside her peacock and playing on the strings of a veena. He hung it in the study and enjoined his son ceremoniously to pray to the goddess every morning as soon as he got up from bed. He inquired untiringly, "Boy, have you made your prostrations before the goddess?" "Yes," the boy answered, and ran in and performed them in a moment, then came back to the hall and just hung about staring at the sky or into the kitchen. Margaya felt angry. He told his son sharply, "God is not like your drill class, to go and dawdle about half-heartedly. You must have your heart in it." "I prostrated all right, father." "Yes, but your mind was where?" "I was thinking of. He considered for a moment and added, "My lessons," knowing it would please his father. But it did not seem to have that effect. "When you prostrate, you must not prostrate so fast." "How long can I lie on the floor prostrate?" the boy asked sullenly. "I can't be lying there all the time." "If you grumble so much about your duties to the goddess, you will never become a learned man, that is all," Margaya warned him. "I don't care," said the boy, very angry at the thought of an exacting goddess. 91. You will be called a useless donkey by the whole world. Remember, Margaya said, his temper rising. Learn to talk with more reverence about the gods. Do you know where I was, how I started, how I earned the favor of the goddess by prayer and petition? Do you know why I succeeded? It was because my mind was concentrated on the goddess. The goddess is the only one who can. The boy cut him short with, "I know it is a different goddess you worshipped. It is that goddess Lakshmi. I know all that from mother." Margaya felt upset by this taunt. He called his wife and asked, "Why have you been talking nonsense to this boy? He is saying all sorts of things." "What has he been saying?" asked the wife, wiping her wet hands. On the end of her sari, Margaya was at a loss to explain. There was really no basis for his charge. He merely said, "That boy contradicts me." He turned furiously on his son and said, "It is all the same goddess. There is no difference between Lakshmi and Saraswati, do you understand?" The boy was not to be cowed. He simply said, "They are different, I know." He said it with an air of finality. Margaya asked, "How do you know? Who told you?" "My master." "Who, Murti? I will speak to that fool. If he is putting obstinate ideas into your head, he is not fit to be your teacher." Then he added, "Tell me as soon as he comes tomorrow or this evening." "But you won't be at home when he comes," said the boy. "Let him wait for me. Tell him he must see me," said Margaya. "All right," said the boy. Margaya then ordered him out, with, "You can go and do your sums now. Don't waste the precious hours of the morning." Balu ran off with great relief to his study and read a page out of his geography at the top of his voice so that all other sounds in the house were drowned. He went to school trembling with the joyous anticipation of carrying a piece of unpleasant news to his teacher. The moment he sighted him he cried, Sir, my father has asked you to wait for him this evening." The teacher's face turned pale. Why? He stammered. Nervously, there were some boys watching them, and he said, "Go away, boys, attend to your work. Why do you stand and gape?" as sternly as he could. He then took Baloo aside and said, "Tell me, boy, why does your father want me to see him?" "I don't know, sir," Baloo replied, enjoying the occasion completely. "I don't know, sir." He shook his head, but his eyes were lively with mischief and suppressed information. The teacher tried to frighten him. "Should you not ask him why he wants to when somebody says he wants to meet somebody else? Must you be taught all these elementary things? Oh, my father cannot be asked all that. He will be very angry if he is questioned like that. Why should I be beaten by him, sir? Do you want me to be beaten by him, sir?" The teacher took him privately under the tamarind tree and begged, "See here, what exactly happened today? Won't you tell me? Won't you tell your teacher?" He sounded melodramatic, and Baloo started bargaining. "I couldn't do any sums this morning." The teacher assured him that he would condone the lapse. And then Baloo went on to the next bargaining point, by which the teacher himself should do the sums and not bother Baloo except to the extent of showing him what marks he had obtained for them. When it was granted, Baloo demanded, "You promised me Barfi. I must have it this afternoon, sir." "You will surely get a packet from me this afternoon," said the teacher affably. After all this, Baloo told him the reason why his father wanted to meet him. The teacher cried, "I say, whatever made you speak thus? Have I ever mentioned to you anything about Lakshmi or anything of the kind?" "My father asked who told me all that, and so I had to say it was you," said Baloo, with obscure logic. The teacher waited for Margaya's arrival in the evening after finishing the lessons with Baloo. Baloo went in to demand his dinner. It was past 8 when Margaya came home. As the pit-pat of his sandals were heard outside, the teacher felt acutely uneasy and stood up. Margaya carefully put away his sandals at the corridor and came in. He saw the teacher and asked, "What is the matter, Teach?" Rubbed his hands and said, "Oh, I finished the lessons long ago, and Baloo has even gone to sleep. I only waited to see you, sir," he added. "Oh, now, impossible," said Margaya. He proceeded to put away his upper cloth and take off his shirt. "I come home after a hard day's work and now you try to catch me for some idiotic school business, I suppose. Do you think I have no other business? Go, go, nothing doing now." "All right, sir," the teacher said, turning to go, greatly relieved. "Is there anything else?" Margaya shouted as the other was going. The teacher thought for a moment and said, "Nothing special, sir," in a most humble tone, which satisfied Margaya. His self-importance was properly fed, and so he said, as a sort of favor to the teacher, "I hope Baloo is all right?" "Oh, yes, sir. He is quite up to the mark, although he needs constant watching." "Well, as a teacher that is what you are expected to do, remember. And any time you see him getting out of hand, don't wait for me. Thrash him well." As a sort of general philosophy, he added, "No boy who has not been thrashed has come to any good. I am going to be extremely busy hereafter and won't have much time for anything. Don't take your eye off the boy." "Yes, sir, I will always do my best. As a teacher, my interest is to see him rise in the world as a man of." Margaya turned and went away to the backyard without waiting for him to finish the sentence. His wife picked up a vessel of water and gave it to him. As he poured it over himself and she could be sure he was feeling cooler, she said, "Why do you constantly say, 'thrash, thrash,' whenever you speak of the child? It is not good." Margaya replied, "Oh, you believe it. It is just a formality with teachers, that is all. It keeps them in trim. After all, the fellow takes 10 rupees a month and he must keep himself alert, but he dare not even touch our little darling. I would strike off that miser able teacher's head." It was all very bewildering to his wife. She asked, "If you don't want him to do it, why do you tell him to thrash him? That is the way things have to be done in the world, my dear. If you see a policeman, ask him to catch the thief. If you see a monkey, ask him to go up a tree, and if you see a teacher, ask him to thrash his pupil. These are the things they do, and it pleases them. They are appropriate. If you want to please me, tell me to put up the interest, and I at once feel I am being spoken to by a friend and well-wisher." There was probably no other person in the whole country who had meditated so much on the question of interest. Margaya's mind was full of it. Night and day he sat and brooded over it. The more he thought of it, the more it seemed to him the greatest wonder of creation. It combined in it the mystery of birth and multiplication. Otherwise, how could you account for the fact that 100 rupees in a savings bank became 120 in course of time? It was something like the ripening of corn. Every rupee, Margaya felt, contained in its seed of another rupee, in that seed in it another seed, and so on to infinity. It was something like the firmament, endless starts, and within each star an endless firmament, and within each one further endless. It bordered on mystic perception. It gave him the feeling of being part of an infinite existence. But Margaya was racked with the feeling that these sublime thoughts were coming to him in a totally wrong setting. He disliked the atmosphere of the Gordon printery. He detested his office and the furniture. Sitting in a chair, dangling one's legs under a table, seemed an extremely irksome process. It was as if you remained half suspended in midair. He liked to keep his knees folded and tucked. That alone gave him a feeling of being on solid ground. And then his table and all its equipment seemed to him a most senseless luxury. They were not necessary for the welfare and progress of a businessman. They were mere show stuff. And all that calling bell nonsense. The best way to call was to shout, "Boy," and keep shouting till the boy's eardrums split and he came running. All this tinkling calling bell stuff was a waste of time. You were not a shepherd playing on a flute calling back your flock. Margaya was so much tickled by this comparison that he laughed aloud one day while he sat in his office and was supposed to be counting the orders for domestic harmony. The boy came running in at the sound of this laughter, and Margaya flung the call bell at him and said, "Don't let me see this on my table. I don't want all this tomfoolery." This was the starting point. The business always seemed to him an alien one. The only interesting thing about it seemed to be the money that was coming in. But money is not everything, he told himself one day. It was a very strange statement to come from a person like Margaya. But if he had been asked to explain or expand it further, he would have said, "Money is very good, no doubt, but the whole thing seems to be in a wrong setting. Money was not in its right place here, amidst all the roar of printing machinery, ugly streaming proof sheets, and the childish debits and credits that arose from book sales with booksellers and book buyers, who carried on endless correspondence over trivialities about 6.25% and 12.5% and a few annas of postage and so forth. It was all very well if you spoke of those percentages with a value of 100 rupees at least. But here you were dealing with 2 rupees per copy and involved yourself in all these hair-splitting percentages. It did not seem to Margaya an adult business. There was really no stuff in it. There was not sufficient adventure in it. There was no thing in it. Book business is no business at all, he told his wife one evening when he decided to part company with Lal. It is a boozy nest fit for youngsters of Balu's age. The lady had no comment to offer, since all business seemed to her equally complex and bewildering. She had to listen with patience as he expanded his theme. It is a rusty business, sitting there all the time and looking at those silly figures. Well, to let you into a secret, there is not much of that either. The figures are falling off. Sales are not as good as they used to be. And then it hurt his dignity to be called the publisher of Domestic Harmony. He would prefer people to forget it if possible. When the profits dwindled, he began to view the book in a peculiarly realistic light. Awful stuff, he told his wife. Most vulgar and poisonous. It will do a lot of damage to young minds. And also to old minds, I think. How can people write brazenly of all those matters? She asked. Margaya said, "Did you ever notice how I have managed not to bring a single copy into this house? I don't want our Baloo even to know that there is such a book." His wife expressed deep appreciation of this precaution. Margaya felt further impelled to add, "I don't want people to say that Baloo enjoys all the money earned through Domestic Harmony. I would do anything to avoid it." He felt very heroic when he said that. He seemed to swell with his goodness, nobility and importance, and the clean plans he was able to make for his son. It was quite a fortnight before he spoke of it to Lal. Lal was thinking that Margaya was attending to his work as usual. Their quarterly statement system worked quite smoothly. There was no chance of any mistake or misunderstanding. Lal himself was a man who believed that in the long run honesty paid in any business. Margaya had complete charge of the sales, and the division of the spoils went on smoothly without a hitch. At tiffin time, Margaya called up his boy and told him, "Go and ask Lal if he will come here for tiffin today. Tell him that there is something I have brought from home." Lal came up. Margaya ceremoniously welcomed him and pointed to the chair opposite. "My wife has sent something special today for my afternoon tiffin, and I thought you might like to taste it." "I have to go home for lunch," said Lal. "I have told them that I would be there." "I will send word to them." "Boy," Margaya cried. He took complete charge of the other. "Call the master's servant, and send him up to inform the lady at the house that Sab is not coming there for his meal. And then run up and bring." He gave an elaborate list of tiffins to be purchased at the canteen next door. "Ask him to make the best coffee." "I don't want coffee, mister. Let it be tea. I have taken coffee only for your sake once or twice. I don't want coffee." "All right, make it tea then, and coffee for me. Hurry up, why are you still standing and blinking? Hurry up, young fellow." There, consuming their repast, Margaya made his proposal. "Lal, you have done a lot for me. I want to do a good turn to you." At the mention of this, Lal sat up interested. Good turn, he thought. That sounded suspicious. No one like Margaya would do a good turn except as a sort of investment. Lal wanted to know what the proposal was going to mean. He knew that it must be something connected with Domestic Harmony, but he felt he should have all his faculties alert. He said very casually, "Well, mister, we must all be helpful to each other, isn't that so? Otherwise, what is life worth? What is existence worth? If we are always thinking of our profits, we shall not be able to do any good in this world. I am glad you think so much of my little service to you. But pray don't think too much of it. I have done the little I could, although financially it has really meant a loss. If I should put into my books all the time and energy, to say nothing of the materials that have been put into our job, it would really turn out to be a loss. If I had engaged myself in some thing else, but my mind will not run on these lines. I always like to think at the end of the day that I have done something without thought of profit, and only then do I feel able to go to sleep." Margaya felt it was time for him to interrupt this peroration. "The same with me. I like to go a step further. Not only lack of profit. I like to feel that I have done something with a little sacrifice for another person's sake. It is not often one gets a chance to do such a thing. But when one does, one is able to sleep with the utmost peace that night." With their mouths stuffed with sweets and other edibles, they spoke for about 10 minutes more on sacrifices and the good life. When they came to the coffee, there was a lull, and Margaya said casually, "Here's the proposal about domestic harmony. I don't like you to bear the burden anymore, since you say that you have had a loss. Why don't you let me take it over completely?" "Why? How can that be? There's our partnership deed. My lawyer." "Oh, let your lawyer alone. We don't need lawyers. Why do you bring in a lawyer when we are discussing something as friends? Is this all the regard you have for our friendship? I am very much hurt, Lal. I wish you had not mentioned a lawyer." He sat looking very sad and broken-hearted at this turn of events. Lal remained quiet for a few moments. He took a cup of tea and gulped it down. He said, "Why should you feel so much upset at the thought of lawyers? They are not demons. Somehow I don't like to do anything without telling my lawyer about it." "As for me," said Margaya, "you need not imagine that I have no use for lawyers. I consult not one but 2 or 3 at a time in business matters. I never take a step unless I have had a long and complete consultation with my lawyer. But now there is nothing to warrant the calling of a lawyer or the police," he added, laughing. The other could not view the matter with the same ease and still looked very serious. Margaya said, "I am not calling you here to give you trouble, Lal. I am only informally trying to talk over a matter with you, that is all, but if you are going to be so suspicious, I had better not speak of it. You see, I am not a person who cares much for advantages. What seems to me the most important thing in human life is good relationships among all human beings." This maudlin statement had the desired effect, and Lal softened a little, and asked, "What is it that you are trying to say?" "Merely that you should let me buy up the partnership for domestic harmony." "It is impossible," he cried. "I can prove that I have observed all the clauses faithfully. How can we cancel it, mister? What is it that you are suggesting?" "It is only a suggestion," Margaya said, "just to save you the bother, that's all. There's nothing more in it, especially since I thought you could employ your time and energies more profitably." "Impossible," Lal cried. "I will not listen to it." "Oh," Margaya said, and remained thoughtful. Then he added, "Well then, I will make a sporting offer." He tapped his chest dramatically. "Just to prove that all is well, here I make this sporting offer to you. Take it if you can. You will then know that I am not trying to gain a mean advantage over you." "What are you saying, mister?" "It is this. I will speak if you promise you will not call your lawyer or the police after me." "Oh, you are a very sensitive man," Lal said. "I meant no offense." "You might not, but it is very depressing. You are a businessman and I am a businessman. Let us talk like 2 businessmen. Either we agree or we don't agree. Either give the domestic harmony solely." "Impossible," cried Lal. "What is the deed worth? Tear it up, I say, and take over the book yourself. I do not want any interest in it. I am prepared to give it to you this very moment, although in a couple of months the marriage season will be on and the demand for the book will go up. I am prepared to surrender it. Are you prepared to accept it?" "No," said Lal promptly. "I do not like to take advantage of anyone's generosity." It needed, however, 2 more days of such talk, rambling, chow-langing, and bordering on the philosophical, before they could evolve an equitable give-and-take scheme. A scheme which each secretly thought gave him a 75% advantage. By it Margaya abandoned forever his interest in domestic harmony for a lump sum payment, and he tore up his document dramatically and put it into the waste paper basket under Lal's table, at which Lal seemed to be much moved. He extended his hand and said, Among businessmen, once a friend, always a friend. Our friendship must always grow. If you have any printing of forms or anything, remember us. We are always at your service. This is your press. He saw Margaya off at the door, and Margaya walked down the market road with a satisfactory check in his pocket.